to Cure America. I'm Star Parker. On a remarkable day here in the nation's capital, the Supreme Court of the United States heard oral arguments in the case of Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, a case out of Mississippi that makes abortion after 15 weeks illegal in that state. The Supreme Court has not heard a case like this, which questions the viability rule that has justified abortion for many years. And this case truly has the possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade, the 1973 case that argued a woman's right to privacy was constitutional and thus legalized abortion throughout our entire country. But we know that abortion is taking human life. In fact, it is the biggest human rights violation in our country today that has led to the death of more than 62 million over the last 50 years. My dear friend, Day Gardner, president of the National Pro-Life Union, joined with Cure to provide congressional testimony in 2015 during the hearings on late-term abortionist Kermit Gosnell, who was convicted of 3 murders and 1 count of manslaughter in Philadelphia. I want to read to you her testimony. I hope you have a tissue next to you. This is in quotes in Now Congressional Record. I cringed and gnashed my teeth while sitting in an almost empty Philadelphia courtroom, hearing testimony after testimony of babies screaming and screeching while being killed by Gosnell and his employees. In quotes, I heard the gruesome testimony about abortion clinic workers and how Gosnell would deliver fully developed, viable children and then turn them over and cut their spinal cords. End quote. Gosnell even joked that one baby was big enough to walk to the bus stop. Then he cut that little boy's neck and tossed him into a shoebox. End quotes. This was no big deal to him to kill those children, to slash their necks as they struggled, as they strained, as they cried. End quotes. If that was not gruesome enough, he severed off their feet of several babies and kept them displayed in jars on a shelf as a sort of souvenir. End quote. Gosnell stored the bodies of children in milk jugs and large soft drink containers and juice bottles. 47 babies were found in the refrigerator freezer. They had to be thawed out like TV dinners so that the coroner could determine their first and last months of life. Moments of life. You know, it's hard. It's hard to hear, but we have to, because this horror has to stop. This is a blight on our nation's history. And for us to allow this gruesome and godless act of abortion to be legal in this country, we must stop. You know, December 1st, our Cure team and thousands of other pro-lifers were on the steps of the Supreme Court praying, weeping, hoping that this would be the day of reckoning. That's our topic today here on Cure America. I'm hoping that you will stay with me, because we want to see an end to legalized abortion in our lifetime. So that's the question. Are we going to? Another question is, will the Supreme Court have the courage to declare this crime against humanity inconsistent with our Constitution? Well, we'll find out next June. But in the meantime, I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Haywood Robinson. He's a medical doctor. He actually early in his career was performing abortions until the Lord got a hold of him. He turned his life around, and he's currently a family physician practicing in Texas, and he's dedicated to ending abortion. Later in the show, you're going to hear from a dear friend and a Cure board member, Angela Minter, who with her daughter Ryan will tell their compelling testimony. Angela's the president and co-founder of Sisters for Life that advocates for preborn children and their families, and anyone that's facing an unplanned pregnancy. And boy, did they do a great job there in Louisville, Kentucky. But before Angela, we have a distinguished panel. They're going to help us, again, sort through the noise of the news, as we do here on Cure America, to find some truth. Our panel today includes constitutional attorney, policy expert, journalist, and they're going to help us walk through the chances of seeing an end to legalized abortion in our lifetime. So let's get with it right after this message.
We just finished up our arguments in the case, and we think that we were able to make all of the points that we thought were critical, that this case is about 50 years of precedent, that women's basic equality and ability to make decisions that are fundamental to their lives are at stake. The court heard all of the arguments and is taking them all very seriously, but obviously it's in the court's hands now.
I told you that I was going to have a dear friend, Dr. Hayward Robinson. My goodness, him and Noreen, we've known each other more than 30 years. They left Los Angeles to move to Texas, and we're still in abortion business, and then God got a hold of their lives. And so I'm going to have him tell the story. And thank you for joining me. I want to know all about it, and I think that people will be intrigued to hear your life story and what God was able to do to get you out of pulling children apart and then be such a pro-life activist. But before I get to your story, we just heard from the Senior Director of Litigation at the Center for Reproductive Rights. We're here at Supreme Court. She was in there making the case for those that want to keep killing children after 15 weeks. She came out. We just saw her nervousness. What are you thinking about in this opportunity for us to make the case that life is sacred at all levels and all stages?
Right. And Star, you've pointed out when you start using the language of the enemy, reproductive rights are words they come up with that means we want to kill our children. We need to start our whole premise, our whole thinking platform is that in the United States of America, or any place on our planet, we should not kill our children. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah. But when we name it other things, voluntary interruption of pregnancy, reproductive rights, it takes away what the reality is, and that is a human being, no matter how small, is life, it's ended. Right. Now, I've had a past where my wife and I, my late wife, we did abortions together. Okay. We killed children.
Tell us about that.
Well, we did it for the money. Nobody does abortions. There's no free abortion clinic in the middle of the inner city. Unfortunately, our people, who, as you know, we kill 3 times the rate that black women should have. You make up 13% of the population, but 39% of the abortions, and we know that's not by accident, and it's not the purpose of this particular show to talk about that, but that was intended.
To talk about it is intended.
Well, Margaret Sanger wanted it that way.
People are lured in, and a recklessness has entered into the black community as we started seeing policy changing in the 60s. It said, don't worry about natural consequences in your sexual being, and people started becoming very reckless. Marriage collapsed, and we do have the abortion rates we do in our community, which is tragic. So we have to say it. So go ahead. So
and coupled with that, as you're saying, there's absolutely nothing, no variable in this equation that holds the men accountable for multiplying all of these children. I was watching a guy on TV. He actually had 40 children from a multitude of mothers. But unfortunately, in this city where we sit in Washington, D.C., people actually benefit from his misbehavior to what? To the downfall of our race. You and I grew up close to the same time as South Central Los Angeles. It was bad, but now it's so much worse because of the things that have come right out of here in Washington, D.C., which so many of these agencies and programs actually benefit from.
That's right.
It's so
and we're seeing more of it. It's one of the reasons we're actually very active here at CURE to kill that BBB, that Build Back Better, because it's just an expansion of the welfare state. But how did you and Noreen, okay, you say it's for the money. So you got into doing abortion in the black community. You even moved to Texas to continue that business because you thought business would be better there. And then, if I recall, God got a hold of you.
Well, once God gets a hold of you, and you know, you and I are believers, it's not just about abortion, but you become transformed by the renewing of your mind. Right. It's not just abortion. It's how you treat people. It's how you treat your wife. It's how you treat, money. But abortion was the thing that's probably the biggest red light in our life. And what the Lord did is says, well, you've got eternal life now, you're on the right team, but the team I want you on is to become a pro-life warrior. And about 35 years ago or so, that's what he did with me and Noreen, was put us into the pro-life arena as pro-life warriors, and we've been blessed to be involved in
as
so
medical
many
doctors,
programs.
family doctors, and now you're traveling the country, you're working with Learn, you're working with 40 Days for Life, really getting the messaging out. You've done things with Cure, and so we really appreciate that. And you both would share your stories, very intimate stories. So we're now at the place where the Supreme Court has an opportunity to end it all. There's a lot of discussion about it just going back to the states, and I'm thinking, well, we tried that during slavery. If it's a crime against humanity, if it's evil, why would we even want it in the states? Is there an opportunity that the court could see through even throwing something so important to God back to the states and just say enough?
Well, that might be the default position initially. And as you said very clearly over the years, it may be legal, but it's not lawful. What we have to do is take the territory we can get when we can get it. Okay. If we can get this thing changed and go state to state, sure, because what that's going to do is allow us to then concentrate pro-life efforts into the places like New York or wherever, where they've codified it in their state constitutions. What we'd like to have is a personhood amendment that makes any human being from one cell up. You know, I was distressed this morning as I was listening to the stream of the arguments, and I'm trying to imagine what it must be like if a preborn child could hear these arguments, because they couldn't understand all of these legal terms that they're using. All they want is an opportunity. When you have that one cell human being, all they need is 40 weeks. Just leave me alone. Let me get out of here so I can be a human being. And I'm reminded about that scene from the movie Amistad, where the man had been taken from Africa. He couldn't speak English, and he was put into the legal system. And the only 3 words he could learn from people, he says, "I want free." The preborn community who has no voice except for ours, they want free life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The preamble of our Constitution says, what? To ourselves and our posterity. Equal protection under the law. That's all they're asking for.
Wow, I don't know what more I can say. I know that the court was the court, and so they did mention a lot of language that are not as simple as I just want to be free.
That's right.
I do understand being the voice for those that don't have one, and how the thousands that were there today to be that voice. I mean, a whole troop came in from Liberty University. I think they brought the whole school.
I think they brought the whole student body.
The whole student body was there. But it was exciting to see so many young people on behalf of life.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you mentioned personhood. That's what it really is. These are human beings that just given more time should live. So a free country shouldn't do this. Are we going to, in our lifetime, see it over? I don't want it 50 states and 50 years from now we're back here in the nation's capital.
Yeah.
What now?
Well, I've thought about that, Star. And I have to think sometimes in the rubric or whatever of our faith. You know, what if there's a time when Americans on both sides of this horrible, horrible Holocaust would then say, enough is enough?
Yeah.
What if there were miraculously a 9-0 vote over to?
Amazing.
What if God, through His Holy Spirit, now our true advocate, of course, is the Lord, but the true justice for life is Brother Clarence.
Well, you know what?
We know where he's coming down.
Where he's coming
and
down.
He's the leader.
And we know that the others have gone through a great struggle to get here. I mean, you know, it's not like back when we could say, well, you know, the court is the court and we've had some disappointments. No, now we have people that were seasoned and tested to get on the court.
That's right.
Kavanaugh didn't get there lightly. He came in bruised. Amy Coney Barrett, it's a bruising. So maybe we might get that Esther moment. Maybe see for this such a time, we might see the end, and then we get an opportunity, I hope, to begin to really care for the kids, to get our pregnancy care centers, to get our maternity homes, to get our churches back engaged. Doctor, thank you for coming in. I know that it's been a long day for you. It's been a long day for most of us that are here. You're getting it a little bit later than we were actually here at the Supreme Court, listening to the arguments together, weeping together, singing together, and it was a joy for you to stop by Cure America for us.
My blessing, my blessing, Star.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll be right back after this break.
It's time for a Cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education, headquartered in Washington, D.C., Cure works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. Cure's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Cure. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Is it your argument that a case can never be overruled simply because it was egregiously wrong?
I think that at the very least, the state would have to come forward with some kind of materially changed circumstance or some kind of materially new argument, and Mississippi hasn't done so in this
Really?
case.
So suppose Plessy versus Ferguson was re-argued in 1897, so nothing had changed. Would it not be sufficient to say that was an egregiously wrong decision on the day it was handed down, and now it should be overruled?
It certainly was egregiously wrong on the day that it was handed down, Plessy, but what the court said in analyzing Plessy to Brown and Casey was that what had become clear is that the factual premise that underlay the decision, this idea that segregation didn't create a badge of inferiority, had been entirely mistaken.
So
and here the state
is it your answer that we needed all the experience from 1896 to 1954 to realize that Plessy was wrongly decided? Would you answer my question? Had it come before the court in 1897, should it have been overruled or not?
I think it should have been overruled, but I think that the factual premise was wrong in the moment it was decided, and the court realized that and clarified that when it overruled.
So there are circumstances in which a decision may be overruled, properly overruled, when it must be overruled, simply because it was egregiously wrong at the moment it was decided.
Yes, a very heavy topic, so we have a very weighty panel for you right now, and I've got some good friends on the panel, but I have a new person that you don't know yet, Melanie Israel. Thank you for joining with us. Policy analyst at the DeVos Center for Religious and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation. I'm really glad that you joined me, and people that watch us regularly know that, hey, how come she's not starting on the other side to end up over with Melanie? And it's because this is a constitutional question, so I want to ask our constitutional attorney first question. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, and well, Heritage is always welcome in our circles. And you were at the court, and you even spoke when they were hearing this. But so where are you from originally?
I am from East Texas, a town called Lufkin.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Well, welcome to Cure America, and my friend Carrie. Okay, Carrie Pickett. You guys know she's senior congressional reporter for the Washington Times. She's had a busy day today, but we really appreciate that you would squeeze in here on Cure America for this week, because this is really, really important. And I've got to find out from you what's going on with media's blackout when it comes to telling people what's going on. But how are you?
I'm doing fantastic.
Okay.
Lots of incredible stuff happening on the Hill this week.
Yeah, it is. I know. It's over, and it's just like, whoa, they're in town and they're busy, so we have to be busy fighting them back. And also all the lobbyists are here too doing their job, which is a good thing. And Jonathan, thank you. Jonathan Alexandria, you know Jonathan, Liberty Counsel, senior counsel there, a constitutional attorney, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Star.
And I want to start with you,
of course,
because we could see the end of the road. This is incredible. So I need you to break down for people who don't follow this. They know abortion's legal. Most of our audience are Christian people. They've been praying for years. But you got to break this down constitutionally, because when you listen to what was going on there, you could get very lost very rapidly in the language that they were using.
I think the first sentence that came out of the court's mouth. Of course, the justice introduces the case, and then the Solicitor General from Mississippi comes right out and says that this law has no place in our history or tradition, that Roe v. Wade has no merit in the Constitution, that it stands on nothing, that it's basically haunting the American culture. And it was simple and it was plain, and that's the whole, really, of the argument. And as you mentioned, usually these abortion cases, you do get down in the weeds, and you're talking about undue burden, and you're talking about viability. This one basically ignored all that and jumped right into the heart of the issue and said, we're dealing with babies in the womb, and abortion has led to the killing of 60 million babies. We have to get rid of this Roe v. Wade standard. And he came right out of the gate. And so,
wasn't that incredible? Yeah. And then there's final words as well. But in the testimony, but they did get into the weeds though. So we heard a lot about viability. We heard a lot about Casey. So before I move on to our other panels, explain to our audience, what is even Casey? People know Roe, they don't know Casey. They wonder, how did we get to where abortion is now legal 9-month, 9th hour, and we're constantly having this discussion?
So Casey took what Roe started and basically evolved it and said, well, if there's an undue burden on the woman's ability to get that abortion, that so-called right of abortion, then it's, although the government does have some interest in the child, they have sort of a greater interest in protecting that woman's right. Yeah. And so much of the debate for all the cases that have led up to the court up until this one got bogged down with what Casey says, got bogged down with what Roe says. This is a case, and Mississippi wrote an incredible law that says we're going to address that discussion, but we're going to bypass it in terms of that's no longer going to be our standard. You can't send this back down to the lower court, Supreme Court. They don't know what to do with this standard. And Supreme Court, this isn't even your role to determine the discussion here. This is up to the people to decide. And like I said, you didn't have to be a constitutional attorney to listen to the argument and realize that it was a life and death argument that was on display in front of the court. Yes,
I think so too, Carrie. And that's why I think that the media didn't know what to do with it. There was a blackout in one place. Just don't even say it. Maybe it'll go away. But to watch what we know is traditional unionized media, front page coverage to say, hey, I think we may be looking at overturning Roe. What's your sense with the folks that you hang out with as a journalist?
Well, if you first watched a number of the talking heads on television, what was one of the first things they started doing? They went right after the justices. Specifically, they said, well, this has a lot to do with those Trump-appointed justices. They first went after Kavanaugh. One of the things they, of course, started mentioning were a lot of the attacks on Kavanaugh during his confirmation. Then they said, well, Kavanaugh said, well, that Roe was settled, and now look what he's saying right now, et cetera, et cetera.
He spent a lot of time, though, pushing it back to the states, talking about, is this our role? Talking about, we should be pretty neutral. So, I'm wondering, how he's getting so much attack. But I'm glad to know that they were going after the justices, which means that they clearly see and overturn a Roe.
Well, that's just it. Yeah. Is that now they do see that it looks like it's going back to the states. But you know what, Star? This is what's fascinating, was that for all of these years, nearly half a century now, a lot of people in the United States had no idea that if Roe was overturned, that it would go back to the states. Yeah. A lot of people thought that, abortion is just going to be banned all over America. Right. And now all of a sudden people realize, it's going to go back to the voters.
Well, you know what, Melanie, this is why I'm so thankful that you're here, because that is what most people think, but I actually find that very problematic. And one of the reasons that I was so enthusiastic to hear so much discussion about Plessy, which I want you to address as well, because some things are just evil. They shouldn't go back to the states. This is not about a democratic process and should we vote. We tried that all through slavery. We tried that all through civil rights movement. So as a policy analyst and expert, is this really a necessary step? Is this something that it has to happen, or is there a possibility that the courts can just say, no, we're not even sending it there?
Right now the question before the court is very specific. Are all pre-viability prohibitions on abortion constitutional? Now, they should
explain that. Let's break that down, because people, they're like, wait, viability, I heard that word again.
Right. So viability, that is the point at which a child is able to survive on their own outside the womb. So in 1973, viability would have been roughly 28 weeks gestation. Now, thanks to advances in modern science, that line has moved about a month and a half earlier. We've had babies as young as 21 weeks be able to survive. So what will the next 50 years bring? And so that's why this case, it's such an important opportunity for states to be able to modernize their laws. As you had mentioned, so many people don't realize what overturning Roe actually means. So right now, in the immediate future, we have the opportunity to educate people about what that looks like. And frankly, Americans are shocked when they realize that we're one of only 7 countries that allows elective abortions after 20 weeks. That's 5 months into pregnancy. And so if the justices correct this grave constitutional error and overturn Roe and return abortion policy to the states, then that's going to give the American people to have laws that reflect what the majority of people actually believe, and that is abortion should be significantly restricted.
So, Jonathan, it begs the question then, are we as a society saying that it's not evil, we just don't want it at a certain point? Is this not a question of humanity? I mean, we went through this. We saw during the entire 89 years before the Civil War of Americans trying this very concept, saying, okay, maybe we can just kind of adjust it in the States. Break this down for us.
Yeah, so during slavery, heard let's have a moderation of slavery. Of course, civil rights said let's have a moderation of this separate but equal standard. And that's, the Plessy case that had a lot of error. For the first time, the court's really talking about Plessy during oral
now
arguments.
they're so embarrassed by it, everybody. I know, even Sonogram, she's like, well, I gotta.
And so there's this exchange between Justice Alito and the Biden's Solicitor General, where they're effectively going through Plessy and going through the same sort of arguments. Well, we have the standard that should we pay attention to the standard? It's done by the court. They articulated this opinion. Should we hold on to the standard that said that if the facilities are equal, then you can separate between blacks and whites. And in order to...
That's Plessy.
That's Plessy.
For people that don't understand, Plessy versus Ferguson was the Supreme Court found that it was constitutionally okay for you to have separation of races.
Right.
That the racial segregation was constitutional.
Right.
50-something years later, Brown said, well, are you sure?
Right.
But we did have that as precedent. And you're right. They keep arguing about, well, you can't overturn long-standing precedent. So what they were asking on the court is, well, then would you have overturned Plessy? So what are we saying here? Are we saying that it's okay to abort? We're going to accept that as a society. We're going to decide individually and individual states and majority rules on whether it's okay to abort. Or was there any discussion at all that we could be hopeful that as a nation we'll say, no, some things are really absolutely wrong. Yeah. Slavery was absolutely wrong. Separation and racial segregation was absolutely wrong to determine certain people inferior. It doesn't sound like you're thinking that that's going to be the first step.
Right now in this case with the question presented in Dobbs, that question about viability is what the court is being asked to answer. Okay. Now, to be completely clear, life is our most basic human freedom, and we need to protect it.
Yes, you've written so well on that. I love what you've written about here.
One of the things that the pro-life movement is so clear about is that we want to protect unborn children in law, but we also want to build a culture of life. And that's where the next step is going to come into play. No matter what happens with this decision, and again, hopefully the court will correct this grave error and open the door to states being able to provide additional protections for unborn children, but that's not where this conversation ends. And the pro-life movement as a whole is going to have to continue pressing forward and going on offense. There will undoubtedly be future litigation about additional laws. We've got things like heartbeat laws and all of that. So this is not the end of the conversation, but it's such a significant moment to be able to, at the very least, have this court say that Roe and Casey were wrong, and it's time to, at the very least,
and by them saying they were wrong, that automatically, because what I think I'm hearing you say is that automatically means because based on this particular case, it immediately just sends it to the states.
Right,
as opposed to them being able to just flat out take the tanny and say, I don't care. we're doing this, so, but this is the natural next step if they don't go over and beyond this case to say that this is
But don't think for a second, though, that the Democrats
was I understanding you correctly? That's
Right. This is one of many steps that we're going to have to be taking to build that.
But okay, you said that we have to, but I'm not sure that. So my question is it's not the only one. We don't have to. They could actually say no, we're not doing this anymore. Is that a possibility at all?
Again, the question immediately before the court that they're having to confront, right? They're limited to that one question. Are all pre-viability? Exactly.
Okay.
But don't think for a second that the Democrats are completely devastated by this. They're looking at this as a tremendous opportunity because right now everyone is thinking, well, Republicans are just going to take back the House, they're going to take back the Senate. The Democrats are now thinking, wow, this is a great opportunity because this is probably going to be decided by June, and then we can get all of our base all reared up for this, and we're going to bring out everyone saying, well, if you don't come out to keep us in the Senate, if you don't come out to keep us in the House, you're going to lose your right to abortion. Right. So this goes back to what I was saying before. It goes back to the voters because before it was it's just the courts who have settled abortion and so on and so forth. So you had no say whatsoever. Now the people specifically, it's like, well, what are your thoughts on abortion?
Right. But and majority rules. We tried. Okay, listen. I want to take a little break here, but I have a problem with this, Jonathan. I really have a problem with this because we did that. The majority tried, and then we had the Dred Scott. Oh my God! Then we had the Kansas, Nebraska. Oh my God! Then we ended up in a civil war over one question. And it seems to me this is the same question. We've already tried to go. Okay, so what happens when now California decides, well, we're going to keep a 9-month, 9th hour, and then what happens in the media war that just describes everything in terms of abortion, and they start convincing more and more people, and then we start hearing all the horror stories about how
we will see where the people actually feel about abortion. At the 9th month.
Well, we're going to get to that right after this because that's a really good point that we need to address. I'll be right back.
I'm the author of this bill, and in 2018 we wrote this bill, a very common sense bill, because technology has changed so much. I'm a registered nurse, and at one portion of my career I delivered babies, and we just knew that it was time after all these years for this law to change.
What do you expect that would happen?
Well, my hopes are if they'll take the bill as it's written, it's very common sense, or they give it back to the states to let the states decide. We have a very conservative state, and this was a bipartisan bill in Mississippi. So I hope they will make a move and change this Roe v. Wade.
Anything you would like to add?
Just pray that this happens. Pray that they have open minds, that they look at the technology that's now available, and we make some changes for our country.
My panel stayed with me, and I'm glad because, as you can tell, I'm a little bit concerned with this. But let's get the public opinion on our side. The public keeps saying we like abortion. The public keeps saying we have decided we don't like marriage as much as we used to. The public keeps saying half the country says we only want kids. So it's just more complicated to me. But you were saying, Carrie, before the break, but they're not comfortable with 9th month, 9th hour. So, and I think I'm hearing you say as well, Melanie, that we have to do incremental perhaps because of where the culture is. Is that what I'm hearing?
And I think too, again, in large part, this is resting on the specific question before the court right now. Okay. And that is, are these pre-viability protections for unborn children constitutional or not? And so that's what the court is being asked to answer, that one question right there. Now,
right, but we've seen the court ask one question before, and they go way past that one question many, many times.
I think to Melanie's point that It's huge progress because we haven't before gotten to that question or gotten to the moral clarifying statements that came out of the mouths of the counselors. I mean, these were clear, stark contrasts between pro-abortion and pro-life.
That was true.
So I think we're definitely moving the ball closer. We're moving it forward, as it were.
Especially on viability.
I think
because
so.
You're right. I mean, I've never heard this much on, well, where is that line then?
Absolutely.
You were right. They were aggressive a little bit, and I think it put those that were trying to defend the status quo of 9th month, 9th hour, which a lot of Americans don't know that we allow abortion in the country, the opportunity to explain themselves. So I get that a little bit. I guess one of the questions that I would ask you, Jonathan, is will the strategy work?
Yeah, it's working, I would say, but it's not enough. Obviously, Star, I completely agree with you that there are times where there has to be a judicial pronouncement that, in fact, these are lies. There has to be a judicial pronouncement that slavery is not good for our country. There has to be these strong moral statements that come from the authorities. If it takes another amendment in the Constitution talking about life being preserved once again, I think it will take a bold, strong statement of that nature. So I'm with you in wanting to push for that. Of course, we've seen, the sunshine just for a moment on this issue. We've, moved the ball forward, as it were, but we do still need that final pronouncement that, there is in fact life.
Well, Melanie brought it up that also it allows us to have these discussions. I mean, I really don't think that people have thought much about it. They think that they want abortion, but now we're being forced to say, well, what exactly is it? It was fascinating how one stumble up was just on, okay, is it a right to privacy or are we talking liberty here? And so we are hearing new discussion. So you can address that, but I think that in this second segment, because we're Cure America, we got to find a solution. People are not living as wholesome lives as we would like them, and that's one of the reasons that we've seen so many abortions in our society. And we know that there will always be people that are caught off guard. There will always be people that we're not going to get rid of sin. We're not going to legislate that, but we can help people when they're in those particular situations and have questions. So are we prepared? Are we going to be prepared for that? Let's just say in the perfect world we get to the place where, you know what, we've done all the incremental. We went back to the states. It ended up in the nation's capital again, and we're looking at another 20 years of abortion still, and it's getting more aggressive because they are getting more aggressive. Then what happens when finally the nation, hopefully without a civil war this time, says, you know what, it is a crime against humanity, let's just stop. We can't do this anymore. After slavery, we weren't prepared. 4 million former slaves, and no one had any idea what to do, and it ended up an absolute mess that we're still realizing some of the implications today.
To your point, Ro.
So what? Yeah, what do we do? I want you to think about that.
A post-Roe world.
Yeah, post-Roe.
Why we're better prepared now.
Not just a post-Roe, because you're telling me post-Roe we go back to state.
That's true.
Post-none.
World. We do have to answer the question about the mother that wasn't expecting a child that finds herself pregnant. Where I'm so encouraged by these pro-life centers that outnumber abortion clinics, something like 21-1 across the country. The pro-life community has had 50 years of being on their back heels, saying, "Whoa, look at this law that's affecting us," but they've also had 50 years to get ready for a moment as to what happens when ultimately abortion is eradicated. So I'm so encouraged by these pro-life centers.
And it was a response that we probably should have been doing anyway, caring about people. But you're right. Now we haven't. I think Texas has law. I want to hear about the public policy side.
But you know what, though? Here's the thing: is that the pro-life movement has also had to deal with a number of questions that have been shot at them for a number of years, and also the arguments that have been going on within the pro-life movement. So, for example, you've had people who would say, "Well, I'm pro-life except for rape and incest," which has been like a raring debate. Exactly.
The butters.
But and then you also have the issue of, well, I want to have the baby, but then what ends up happening if I give up the baby and then the baby wants to come and find me, or rather the child wants to come and find me later on. It's, what kind of accommodations can I have? So the pro-life movement.
No, you're right.
But you see, like,
it's been complicated.
Yeah. So basically, to your point, this has been a marathon over the years as to what types of responses can the pro-life movement provide, which they have been providing over the years, which has been, by the way, part of the incrementalism.
Well, speak to that. Let's hear you, because you're an expert in this, and tell us about. And you're from Texas originally. You're here in D.C. now. Texas is now double did it. They said, we're going to end it over here, but we've got money over here to help
$100
build our
million.
pregnancy care centers.
Exactly.
Tell us what's going on.
We've had for the last half century the pro-life working in culture, in civil society, to build that culture of life and to support mothers, to support families. These thousands of pregnancy resource centers all across the country. Hopefully all of this discussion about the Dobbs case will prompt people to go Google, what is my local pregnancy center? How can I help? How can I, exactly, these maternity homes.
Or adoption.
Exactly. This is an opportunity for people to really get activated and think, well, what can my church do to serve moms and babies in my community? And I think that's a really powerful example of what this discussion about Dobbs has the potential to do, is to activate civil society to do more. And again, we also have...
To judge itself about what we have allowed. So am I hearing like maybe this time we can kind of get it right without a civil war, but the answer...
Which is what the parental burden, which is what they're talking about in the Supreme Court case. Like, what exactly is the parental burden now? Because it doesn't exist today. You can't make that argument.
You can't make that argument. Safe havens. I mean, they brought
and
that up.
We've had so much progress for women. Women in the workplace, for example, their position in society is so different than it was in 1973. Just as the science has changed and what we know about prenatal development, so too has women's position in society and their ability to succeed and reach the highest levels of office, including the Supreme Court of the United States.
Even with children or
Absolutely.
without. So it does take all of those questions off
Justice
the table.
Barrett, who was on the court, 7 children, the Attorney General, a single mother able to talk about her experience, the woman that brought forth the legislation in Mississippi. These are all women that, to your point, have elevated to the highest levels of government. So we're not in the same position of having to pit so-called women's rights against the rights of the child, or women's rights versus their ability to be mothers and be in career at the same time.
That's true. That question came up as well, though, in the court about the two, that there are two we're talking about here, and we know women have progressed, and we know that women have decided that, well, I can do whatever I want, basically, as a society. I mean, we're very pagan and materialistic in that regard. And so marriage is not as esteemed for women as it once was, that this was a beautiful place and station. Mom, married. We can have another discussion another time whether this is a good idea.
That's one of the things that so many...
Let's go to the child part of it, though. As long as we're saying, well, we're continuing to move forward, the women are going to continue to move forward, and so maybe we can get out there and convince people that that abortion is not a good idea, that eventually over time we may be able to end it. Is that what I'm hearing?
One of the points you just made, that word child was used even by the abortion proponents. They said child time and time again, and there's just something I wanted to point out. They couldn't get past the point that, well, we're actually dealing with the child, and I think the public knows it at this point.
Now, is this because of the technology and advancements, or is this because we have a more savvy court? We have people that knew what was coming and they were much more prepared.
All of the above.
I think it's both, absolutely. And I think, once again, this has to do with the fact that technology, even though Sotomayor didn't want to really admit that we have advanced in medical technology, but still technology, it is on the web. It is in mass communications. Everybody knows.
That we don't know what we're doing.
Exactly.
But that brings me back to, I'm just not sure then, because that I want to buy the incremental argument, or I guess we could and we can just endure it, but maybe I'm just an all or nothing. I don't like the fact that we are saying,
I'm with you there.
Well, we know this is evil, but we're going to put up with evil until people are convinced that maybe we shouldn't be as evil, and we're just kind of get closer and closer to where we're not bad people again. I don't know. I didn't agree with manumission laws because I thought that slavery was wrong. So now we're not going to leave them out in the bush with a little baggage after they're 65. We pass a law that says, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to pass a law now that says, okay, you can't cut off their leg, but you can cut off their hand.
I'm with you there,
I just
Star.
have a problem with this. So is there going to be justice for the child?
I think it has a lot to do with the whole idea of being shamed that one ends up getting pregnant because, maybe you're still a teenager.
How can you even say that anymore? We have this extensive welfare state where people brag about their 9 children with 9 different baby mamas and daddas and everything else. I'm just not sure. I think that part of culture changed too.
It's the whole idea. It's the whole idea like, oh, maybe your kid was an accident, whatever the case may be. So it's that whole idea of finally getting completely past that.
Okay, where are we going in public policy?
Right. So again, this is why I always try to underscore the marathon, not a sprint, because there is so much left to do. And that's why it's so important that people in civil society, in their churches, in their own neighborhoods, play a role here, because obviously the Supreme Court is presented with these questions, and we have brilliant lawyers who are able to go and argue those cases, and state legislators that are passing hundreds of pro-life laws to the extent possible under Roe versus Wade.
Right. Which I guess is the obstacle, which is what I think you're also saying. It's like, look, they've been trying to do, but this national law is standing in the way of what states want to do.
Removing that barrier will significantly open the door for states to be able to do more. But again, that's not the end of the conversation. And I don't think anyone in the pro-life movement thinks that it ends there. And that's why it's so important that civil society steps up and that we show women and their babies that we care deeply about them and we want people to be able to flourish and to thrive. And that means doing things like promoting pro-family policies where moms and dads can raise their children and provide them with a safe environment and education and all of those other things. So we've got a lot of work to do.
I will say, Star, if we're still having this conversation a decade from now, then we've dropped the ball. This is the window of opportunity that we have.
Okay.
The court's in our favor.
It's open. Okay. And we'll know by June, they're saying next year. Then we know that we're going to have all this media onslaught about how horrible you are because you're really hitting the end row. And then they're going to use your comments and say, she told us this was.
There's more to do.
There's more to do. And we're going to, but our end goal is there. Yeah. I just pray that, there was an enthusiasm in the air at the court. You were there. You actually got to meet with the attorneys before they went in. Prayerful, a lot of prayer was there. You were on the Hill fighting other things, but thank you for that as well, Jonathan. You were there because I think, in fact, at one point, the entire Liberty University showed up.
Yeah,
exactly.
Thousands of students. And that's the amount of diversity in the races that were there on the pro-life side and the diversity in ages that were there on the pro-life side.
It was amazing. But quick story though. One of my dear friends, a little bit darker than myself, or maybe we're about the same skin tone. She's walking toward the court, and the policeman said, "Oh no, you guys are around the corner over there." And she's like,
"Shame on you."
What?
Yep.
What does that mean? He assumed that because she was black, she was with the pro-death people, and she was going to be the loudest voice in pro-life. Hey guys, thank you so much. No, it's not. You're right. It was so diverse. It was every age, every background, every denomination. God's people showed up. So I'm hopeful that it is just the beginning of the end of Roe. I'll be right back after this.
With the sonograms, the technology of ultrasound, you can see a picture of a baby now at 15 weeks. And that is just incredible. But also what's incredible that is it's taken us this long because this technology's been around a while. But it's been in God's time that this is before the Supreme Court today that we're looking at it.
Star Parker here at the Supreme Court on behalf of BlackCommunityNews.com, standing with some very familiar faces to you. At least one of them is very familiar, Angela Mentor on the board of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. We're here on the incredible day that finally many have been waiting for, the United States Supreme Court listening to the Mississippi case to see if we're going to finally get rid of this crime against humanity. Angela, thank you for joining us all the way from Louisville, Kentucky.
That's right. I'm blessed to be here on this historical day, Star. Thank you for having us. We're excited. get it.
And I'm glad you said an us, because I want you to introduce me and our audience to this incredible person that you're with that I've known since a little girl, but
there you go.
A very, very important part of your life. I want you to tell your story, and I want you to tell, and then I'm going to let Ryan tell her part of that story.
Absolutely. Well, my daughter Ryan here is really representing the 62 million babies that have been killed through abortion. Like you said, the crime against humanity. Ryan is one of 3 of our babies that were getting ready to be killed through abortion. My husband and I, Parnell and I, when we were in college, we paid money for 2 of our babies to be killed on the altar of choice and really inconvenience out of ignorance. And so the Supreme Court didn't do us any favors when they legalized abortion in 1973. We were a product of that. We figured if it's legal, it must be okay. And just being ignorant. But yet when we were in college, we were getting made to pay money for a 3rd baby to be killed through abortion. But because someone betrayed my confidence and told my dad that I was pregnant, I like to say it's something to be said by someone that betrays your confidence when a life is at stake.
That's right.
And so as a result of that, she betrayed my confidence, told my dad and my mom I was pregnant, I was planning on having an abortion, paying money for a 3rd baby to be killed. And as a result, my dad called me in the dorm room and said, Angie, didn't try to be politically correct. And he was a state legislator at the time, boast of being very liberal. But God moved upon his heart, and he said, Angie, don't kill your baby.
Amen.
And as a result, Ryan Whitney Mentor is alive today. She wasn't a blob of tissue. She's a human being that deserved life, and she's with me today.
And
traveled all the way.
You went to the person that betrayed your confidence to just get a little bit of extra money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So what do you say with those that are saying, well, you guys are standing in the way of those that want to have an abortion because they don't want to be straddled down with this child, and yet they can't afford to pay for a abortion? And they're even talking about going back to clothes hangers. In fact, I want you, Ryan, to speak to that. What do you say to someone that tries to pretend that you're not relevant, that you're inconvenient?
Well, hallelujah. Well, we'll go back to the Affordability Pact. Can you afford the suicidal thoughts that come along with abortion? I witnessed my mother go through suicidal thoughts. Can you afford the breakdown of the family that happens when abortion happens? My mother had to be away from us for a while, and we had to stay with my dad. And I was essentially, raised as a younger person, by my father and my 2 brothers because, abortion was afflicted on my family. So, can you afford the guilt that goes along with that? If you don't have a spiritual background, are you going to be able to overcome that? Can you afford the shame that the devil may try to put on you? So there's a lot of things that we may not be able to afford when it comes to abortion.
And
so
things that people are not even thinking about. Like you said, that the lack of information. I mean, there's so many that stand in the way, even to be able to tell people about the abortion. Tell us about the work that you do. I've been there for Sisters for Life. I just did your banquet, your annual banquet, where you were able to reach your goal financially, which is a miracle in itself.
Absolutely.
But I've also been out there in front of the only clinic left in Kentucky, where you're standing there helping women make a decision because no one else is giving them the information they need to know. When you go in there, you're going to come out changed. Don't go in there.
That's right. Well, you said tell about our work, and one of the primary things that we do is our sidewalk counseling. Another thing you said is that people are trying to stand in the way of mothers knowing and fathers knowing, families knowing that there's another choice, that there's much help available. Right now we have a buffer zone that we're fighting against, where they're literally trying to keep us from letting that mother know, a mother that was just like me, just to know that there's another choice, just to know that there's much help available. And so Sisters for Life provides that help. Not only us, but pregnancy centers all around the country, all around the world. There's so many people. God's not going to tell us to keep our baby and not provide help. And so we're his help from the sanctuary. Sisters for Life does sidewalk counseling. But not only that, we're there if the mother and the father make a decision to have an abortion like we did. They're going to need support. They're going to need help. They're going to need to know the truth. They're going to need to know the love of Christ. And so we're there to offer that as well. And to mentor young people. We do have a co-ed mentoring program.
Oh, I saw your co-ed mentor program. You got the guys now, the Brothers for Life.
Yes.
But what was really unique is not only it's good to know you're there when they fall.
Yes.
But it's better to know they don't have to fall at all.
Amen.
You just shared with us a couple that not only did you save their little baby, you're buying her a wedding gown because they're going to get married.
Yes, she and her husband, as a matter of fact, they texted me this morning and saying, you know what, I pray you all win that case. And so these are people that were going into an abortion mill. Right. God had us there to make sure that they knew he loved him and that there was much help available. And you know what, that there's a different path. Yeah. There's a better path for them. Yeah. And so they made that choice to keep their babies and they're getting married this spring. That's awesome. Looks like my son maybe marrying them.
Oh, wow.
And we're just not going to just provide a wedding dress, but just provide a life
Everything
of
that
support
they
to
need.
walk alongside them and love them and be with them.
Ryan, speak to the young person. Speak to someone that's your age that's saying, yeah, but I just got to college. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but a girl got to do what she got to do. Talk to her.
Yeah, well, the girls also got to make sure that her mind, body, and soul are healthy. And so, if you go and get that abortion, you run the risk of basically ruining that, and it's going to be hard for you to focus if you've got in your back of your mind that you just pay money for your baby to be killed. And, it's just going to be hard to zone in and focus on, your studies and, your other relationships because you cut off a relationship that should be there. And
Well,
so
speak to that as well. What is that relationship? The recovery, if you decide to have that child, you're in college, you're in the first year, there's life after childbirth,
Yes,
even if
there is.
if the pregnancy was not exactly what you had planned or thought about for your life. Speak to
Exactly.
that young woman about what happens when she keeps that baby.
Well, for one, that baby becomes your pride and your joy. That baby becomes something that you want to live for. That baby becomes an encouragement for you to want to make the great grades, want to be successful, because you see someone looking to you, someone that wants to be like you. So that's going to be like your driving force for you to make sure that you make something out of your life.
And you know what else happens? You get grandbabies. I want to thank my friends and mentors for joining with us. They came all the way from Louisville, Kentucky, Sisters for Life. You want to look them up. They are doing an incredible work. And I'll be right back here on blackcommunitynews.com live at the United States Supreme Court as the oral arguments are taking place today on ending abortion.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education, headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Robert Kennedy, when he was running for president, had to make a speech in an African-American church on the day that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died. And they didn't want him to go out there, but he went out there anyway. And what bubbled up out of him is now on his gravesite, because 2 months later, he was also assassinated. And that quote from his poet that he said that day was, "Even in our sleep, pain, which never forgets, falls drop by drop on our heart, that in our own despair, against our own will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." End quote. After hearing that and knowing that, I started asking the Lord, what is awful grace? Well, awful grace is redemption after repentance. Yes, we have unmerited favor from God, getting from Him what we do not deserve. But we have to come to that place of repentance as a nation on this big question of crime against humanity, abortion. 1 John 1:10 says, if we say we haven't sinned, we have deceived ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Our nation has sinned. We have allowed the sin of abortion to go on for so long, too long in our country. Abortion is not the first time in history that mankind expressed the vileness of its nature. And we've got to get to the place where we're understanding that abortion is vileness. Humanity was born into war, the struggle between good and evil, a constant war within ourselves, and a constant war in where we live our lives, where our lives touch each other, in our communities, in society, and law. And what we know about mankind is some choose good, Abel, Moses, Esther, and some choose evil, Herod, Hitler, Sanger. As long as we're going to allow abortionists to prey on the most vulnerable in our nation, it will be very hard for God to shine His light on us. How long are we going to allow abortionists to savagely and brutally dismember the offspring of our country's most vulnerable? The scripture says, I have set before you this day life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your seed will live. Well, our prayer today here at Cure America is that the Supreme Court will choose life, that our nation will choose life, that we will turn from our wicked ways, repent, and see that awful grace of God redeeming us back to Himself. Thank you for joining us this week, and I'll see you again next week here on Cure America.